Malik Williams sat quietly in his third-grade classroom at Meadow Ridge Elementary, his eyes fixed on the teacher, Mr. Thompson, as he called on students to share about their parents' jobs. The room was filled with excitement as each child took a turn, but Malik remained silent, waiting patiently for his chance. He wasn't the first to raise his hand. That was usual for him. He wasn't like the others, bold, brash, and eager to speak. He was different. He wasn't the kind to crave attention, but today was important. Today, he was going to share something special. The day had started like any other. Sunlight streaming through the windows, the buzzing chatter of children settling into their seats. It was Career Week at Meadow Ridge, a time when parents came in to share what they did for a living. Malik's classmates eagerly raised their hands, eager to boast about their parents' jobs. There was Tommy Anderson, whose mother was a dentist, proudly displaying x-rays of healthy teeth. Sophia Wilson's dad, the local hardware store owner, spoke about his business. Jason Evans' mother, an accountant, explained the importance of numbers. Malik's dad, however, was different. His father wasn't just a regular worker, he was a military helicopter pilot. Malik had been looking forward to this moment, the chance to tell everyone that his father's job was special. But as his turn approached, he felt a knot in his stomach. What if they didn't believe him? What if they laughed? Finally, Mr. Thompson pointed toward him. "Malik, it's your turn," he said with a smile. Malik stood up, his hands trembling slightly. He walked to the front of the room, adjusting his yellow backpack, which seemed much too large for his small frame. His classmates looked at him expectantly, but Malik didn't look at them. He looked at the teacher, his eyes filled with the hope that today would be different. "My dad is a pilot," Malik began, his voice steady but soft. "He flies helicopters for the military, big ones. He's a captain. He saves people." The room fell silent for a moment, and then Malik saw it, a flicker of skepticism in Mr. Thompson's eyes. The teacher's lips curled slightly, as if holding back a smirk. "Oh, really? A military helicopter pilot?" Mr. Thompson said, his voice dripping with condescension. "That's quite the story, Malik." Before Malik could respond, a few students snickered, and then one of them, Billy Parker, started making loud helicopter noises. He flapped his arms like rotor blades. "Whoop! Whoop! Whoop! Coming in for a landing, Captain Williams," he shouted. The class erupted in laughter. Even Mr. Thompson chuckled, clearly amused. Malik's face flushed with humiliation, his chest tightening. He wasn't lying. His father really was a pilot, but no one believed him. He had expected laughter, but not from his teacher. "Enough," Mr. Thompson said after a few moments, raising his hand to silence the class. "That's a nice imagination, Malik," he said, his voice now laced with mockery. "But let's focus on real jobs, shall we?" Malik felt the sting of his words, the weight of every eye in the room on him. He stood there, his hands clenched at his sides, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. "But my dad is a pilot," Malik said, his voice a little firmer now. "He really is." Mr. Thompson waved his hand dismissively. "Right, Malik. Sure. You could say your mom's a nurse, couldn't you?" The bell rang, signaling the end of the sharing time, but it didn't bring any relief. Malik walked back to his seat, his head hanging low. His classmates were still laughing, still whispering. He felt small, like he was invisible. But as he sat down, he felt something else too, a warmth. A pair of eyes was watching him. Malik glanced up and saw Jace Bennett sitting across the room. Jace, the boy with thick glasses and a quiet demeanor, was looking at Malik with a look of sympathy. Jace didn't laugh. He didn't join in with the others. Malik wanted to say something, but Jace didn't speak either. They both understood the unspoken language of being different, and in that moment, Malik knew he wasn't entirely alone. Later that day, when Malik was walking home, he didn't notice the dark SUV parked across the street. He didn't notice the man sitting inside, watching him closely as he passed by. The man's gaze followed Malik with cold intensity, as if waiting for something. Malik didn't know it yet, but the truth he carried about his father's job, his father's secret life, was much more than anyone could imagine. And soon the world would see just how important Malik's story really was. The next day, Malik walked into school with the same yellow backpack slung over his shoulder. His head was a little higher than yesterday, though the memory of the laughter still echoed in his mind. He'd tried to push it out of his thoughts, but it was like a shadow that lingered, following him everywhere. Career week was still in full swing, and today was the day Malik's classmates would bring in items to show off their parents' jobs. Malik had nothing to bring. His father's work was classified, and Malik knew better than to try to explain that. But that didn't matter. His father's career wasn't about things you could touch. It wasn't about the physical objects. His father was a hero, and that was enough. Malik didn't need anything else. As he sat at his desk, a familiar unease crept into his stomach. He knew what was coming: the laughter, the disbelief, the subtle glances. But Malik had promised himself that he would not back down, no matter what. His father had made him a promise once, a promise that had never wavered in Malik's heart. "I'll always come back for you, son." Just as the bell rang and the class settled in, Mr. Thompson entered the room, his usual stern expression quickly replaced by a forced smile. "All right, class," he began. "Today is your chance to show off what your parents do. We'll start with Tommy and his mom's dentistry tools. Let's see who's got the coolest stuff." One by one, the children eagerly hopped to their feet, presenting things like a stethoscope, a pair of shiny dentist's gloves, or accounting books. When it was Malik's turn, he stood up slowly, his heart thumping loudly in his chest. His hands were cold, but he wiped them on his pants, steeling himself. "Malik," Mr. Thompson called, "what did you bring today?" Malik took a deep breath. "I didn't bring anything, Mr. Thompson, but my dad flies military helicopters. He saves people." Malik's words hung in the air like a weight. For a brief moment, the room was quiet. Then, as though on cue, the laughter started again. Soft at first, then building. Whoop! 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 Billy Parker flapped his arms again, making helicopter sounds louder than before. Malik felt his face flush. Mr. Thompson smiled politely, but Malik could see the slight narrowing of his eyes. "Nice try, Malik," the teacher said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "But without proof, it's just a story, isn't it?" Malik's chest tightened. He wanted to say something, anything to make them understand, but the words got stuck. They never believed him, not once, and it hurt. Deep down, it hurt worse than the laughter. He sat down quickly, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. As the others continued showing off their items, Malik felt something new bubbling inside of him. Anger, frustration, but also a quiet determination. His father had never lied to him. Why should anyone else think he was? He wasn't going to let anyone take that away from him. The rest of the day passed in a blur, with the sounds of whispers and giggles following Malik like an invisible weight. By the time the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Malik was exhausted. He walked home slower than usual, his feet dragging on the sidewalk. He wanted to forget everything. He wanted to just disappear into the quiet of his room, but that dark SUV was waiting again, parked just a block away from his house. The same black SUV that had followed him yesterday. He glanced at it briefly, his stomach flipping uneasily. He hadn't told his mother about the car yet. She was busy enough with her job at the hospital, working long shifts to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Naomi, Malik's mom, always smiled when she saw him, kissed him on the forehead, and told him everything would be okay. But Malik didn't feel okay. Something wasn't right. That night, Malik lay in bed, his yellow walkie-talkie clutched in his hands. It didn't work, at least not in the traditional sense, but it was their thing. It had been a gift from his dad before his last deployment. Every night, Malik whispered into it, hoping somehow that his words would reach his father wherever he was. "I'm doing okay, Dad. I told them about you today. They didn't believe me, but I'm not lying. You're real, and I know you're out there." He paused, his voice cracking a little. "I just wish they could see it too." He clicked the button on the walkie-talkie, as he had done 1,000 times before, and waited. He imagined his father's reassuring voice on the other end. Malik always believed that one day, when his father returned, he'd show them all. He closed his eyes, thinking of the promise his dad had made to him, thinking of how much he missed him. His fingers curled around the walkie-talkie tightly. Tomorrow, things would be different. He'd make sure of it. The next day, Malik didn't bother telling his mother about the SUV. She was busy preparing dinner, already worried about the late hours she'd be pulling at the hospital. Malik had learned long ago to keep his worries to himself, Naomi, his mother, had a way of making everything feel like it would be okay, even when the world outside felt too big and too complicated. After school, he noticed the SUV again, parked down the street, its tinted windows hiding the face of whoever was inside. Malik quickened his pace, his heart racing. He didn't understand why the man in the SUV kept watching him, but he knew one thing for sure: it wasn't safe. The feeling gnawed at him. At school, things hadn't gotten better. The day after career week, Mr. Thompson continued to treat Malik differently, even if he didn't say anything outright. He didn't need to. There was a subtle shift, a chill in the air, whenever Malik raised his hand to answer a question, a hesitation in Mr. Thompson's voice when he addressed him. The kids in class, too, had started to treat Malik with a mix of pity and mockery. Whenever Malik walked by, he could hear whispers. "Did you see what Malik brought today?" whispered Rachel Turner to Billy Parker. "His dad's a superhero, apparently." Billy's laughter echoed across the room. Malik had grown used to it, but it still stung. Malik took his seat and tried to ignore the whispers, but then he heard something that made his blood run cold. "You know, some kids just don't know how to tell the truth," Mrs. Winters, the school counselor, said quietly as she walked past his desk, her voice just loud enough for him to hear. His heart pounded as the words sank in. Truth? What was that supposed to mean? He had never lied about his father. His father was a military pilot. He didn't care what anyone else thought. But suddenly he felt his resolve slipping. The doubts crept in like shadows, and for the first time, Malik wasn't so sure that his father's promise would be enough. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. No matter what he said, no matter how many times he told the truth, nobody would believe him. Later that afternoon, Malik sat on the steps of the school, doodling in his notebook. His thoughts were jumbled, but one thing stood out. His father had always told him that when things got tough, he should trust his instincts. He glanced over his shoulder, looking at the school grounds. The SUV was parked across the street again, and this time Malik could see the figure inside. It wasn't just anyone. It was the same man he had seen the day before. Malik froze, his heart thundering in his chest. The man's face was partially visible behind the window, his cold, calculating eyes fixed on Malik. A chill ran down Malik's spine. This wasn't normal. He stood up quickly and darted around the corner of the school, heart racing. What was going on? Why was the man following him? Malik didn't have answers, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let this go. He was going to find out what the man wanted. That evening, when he walked home, Malik kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with the SUV. But it was still there, following from a distance. By the time he reached his house, the vehicle was parked a few blocks away, blending in with the shadows. As he entered the house, he could hear his mother bustling in the kitchen. "Hey, baby, how was school?" Naomi asked, not looking up from the stove. Malik hesitated. He wanted to tell her about the man in the SUV, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the fear that she would think he was just being paranoid, or maybe it was the realization that even if he told her, she wouldn't have an answer. What could she do? She worked late shifts as a nurse. She had enough on her plate. "I'm fine," Malik muttered, dropping his backpack by the door. "I'll be in my room." He didn't want to lie to her, but he couldn't help it. He needed to keep her safe. And right now, the less she knew, the better. Later that night, after Naomi had left for her shift, Malik retreated to his room. He opened the shoebox under his bed that contained his father's mementos, photos, letters, patches from military flights. They were his most treasured possessions, each one a reminder of the man who had promised to come home. He took out a photograph of his dad in his military uniform, standing tall beside a helicopter. His father's warm smile was frozen in time, the confidence in his eyes unshakable. Malik's fingers lingered over the photo. "Why won't they believe me?" he thought, his throat tight. As he stared at the picture, a small noise from outside caught his attention. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. His eyes darted toward the window. Through the blinds, Malik saw a shadow moving across the yard. Someone was near his house. Malik's pulse quickened as he watched the figure outside his window, his eyes straining to see through the blinds. It was late, and the streetlights cast long shadows across his yard. The figure was tall, moving in the darkness with a deliberate slowness. Malik's stomach churned. Who was it? He wasn't sure, but he could feel something wasn't right. For the past few days, the dark SUV had been following him. Malik couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him, the same eerie sense that something big was looming just out of sight. But tonight felt different. The figure wasn't just a shadow, it was close, closer than ever before. Malik stood motionless, his heart racing in his chest. He knew what he had to do. There was only one person who could help him figure this out. He couldn't tell his mom. She was at work, and besides, she had enough to worry about. Malik had to take matters into his own hands. He had to find out who this man was and why he was watching them. He grabbed his walkie-talkie from the desk and held it to his lips, whispering, "Dad, if you can hear me, I'm scared. Please come home." The words felt weak, almost as if the walkie-talkie would somehow bring his father's voice back to him. But nothing happened. It had been so long since he had last heard his dad's voice, and the silence now felt louder than ever. Malik took one last look out the window. The shadow was moving closer to the side of the house. He could make out the faint outline of a figure standing just outside the door, motionless. It was as if the man knew exactly where Malik was watching from. With a sense of dread settling over him, Malik slowly backed away from the window. He glanced around his room, his mind racing. He needed a plan, a way to protect himself. He reached for the box under his bed again and pulled out the small collection of his father's belongings, his uniform patches, his flight books, the photograph. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door. Malik's heart skipped a beat. He froze, his body tense. The knock was sharp, deliberate, someone who wanted to be heard. "Malik?" A voice called from the other side, soft and calm. It was Naomi, his mother. "Mom?" Malik's voice cracked. He rushed to the door and opened it slowly, trying to hide the panic in his eyes. Naomi was standing in the hallway, dressed in her hospital scrubs. She looked tired but smiled when she saw him. "You okay, baby?" she asked, her tone gentle. "I thought I heard something. Are you feeling all right?" Malik opened his mouth, but no words came out. He didn't want to tell her the truth. How could he? She was already so stressed, so tired. She didn't need to know about the strange man outside or the car following him. He swallowed the fear in his throat and forced a smile. "I'm fine, Mom," he said, his voice shaky. Just a bad dream. I'm sorry." Naomi studied him for a moment, her brow furrowed as she took in his expression. She knew something was wrong. She always could tell when he was hiding something. "Well, if you're sure," she said slowly. "I need to go back to work. But I'll be home early tomorrow, okay? If anything feels off, you know you can call me, right?" Malik nodded, though he didn't feel okay. Not at all. He wanted to tell her everything, but somehow he couldn't. Something inside him told him that he needed to handle this on his own. Naomi kissed him on the forehead and walked down the hall toward the door. "I love you, Malik. Be safe." "I love you too, Mom," Malik whispered, watching her go. As the door clicked shut behind her, Malik turned back toward his window. He was alone again. The figure outside the house had moved. He could see it clearly now, standing by the side of the house, looking up at his window. Malik's blood ran cold. This was no random stranger. This was someone who had been following him, and he knew too much. Malik didn't know how, but he could feel it deep in his bones. This was about more than just his father's job. Whoever this was, they had been watching him for days, waiting. And then Malik noticed something else. The SUV was gone, no longer parked across the street. It had vanished. The man outside the window didn't move. He was staring directly at Malik, his eyes cold and calculating. For the first time, Malik didn't feel afraid. He felt a surge of anger, of resolve. He wasn't just going to hide. He wasn't going to be the kid they thought couldn't handle the truth. His father had told him he was capable of anything, and Malik believed it. He wasn't lying. He wasn't crazy. His father was real, and he was coming home. But first, Malik had to survive whatever this was. The next morning, Malik barely slept. Every creak of the house, every shift in the wind, felt like an ominous sign. His mind raced with thoughts of the man who had been watching him and the mystery surrounding his father's disappearance. Why had no one believed him? Why was his father's job so secret? What were they hiding? He had tried so hard to keep the truth intact, but the world outside had never understood. It wasn't until now that Malik realized just how dangerous the world could be when it chose to ignore what didn't fit in its expectations. But today was different. Today, he wouldn't hide. Malik sat by his window, watching the sun slowly rise, casting long shadows across the street. His fingers fidgeted with the walkie-talkie again, even though he knew it wouldn't bring any answers. He pressed the button one last time, his voice trembling but firm. "Dad, if you can hear me, come back soon. I'm ready. They don't believe me, but I know you're coming." As if on cue, Malik heard a sound, a faint hum of a helicopter's blades in the distance. He leaned forward, his heart pounding. It couldn't be. He rushed to the window, pulling the blinds open to see the sky darkening with the shape of a large, matte black helicopter cutting through the morning air. The noise grew louder, and Malik's breath caught in his chest. The helicopter descended over the school, the blades creating a roar that shook the windows. It hovered above the playground, sending papers flying through the air and causing dust to swirl around the field. Malik stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief, but also with a feeling of triumph. In that moment, he knew it was real. The helicopter lowered closer to the ground, and a figure emerged from the open side door. He was tall, dressed in tactical military gear, his helmet under one arm as he slid down a rope ladder to the ground. As the dust settled, Malik's heart surged when he saw the man's face. It was his father, Captain Elijah Williams. Malik ran outside, the front door flinging open as he raced toward the playground. He didn't care about the surprised looks or the gasps from the teachers and students standing by. All that mattered was his father, the hero he had believed in, the one who had promised him he would come back. "Dad!" Malik shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. Captain Elijah Williams turned, a smile breaking across his face. "Starlight," he said, his voice deep and warm. He dropped the rope ladder and ran toward Malik, scooping him up into his arms in a powerful embrace. "You came," Malik whispered, his voice muffled against his father's shoulder. "I knew you would." "I promised," Elijah said softly, his arms holding Malik close. "I told you I'd always come back for you." The crowd of teachers and students stood in stunned silence, their eyes wide as the realization set in. The helicopter hovering above them was no child's fantasy. The man who had landed was no figment of Malik's imagination. He was real, and Malik had been telling the truth all along. Mrs. Winters, the counselor, who had been so quick to question Malik's story, was the first to speak, her voice a mix of shock and disbelief. But how is this possible?" "Some things are classified, ma'am," Elijah replied, his voice steady. He set Malik down gently and stood tall. "But I can assure you, your student was telling the truth." As the helicopter's engines slowly powered down, Malik looked up at his father with a new sense of awe. The man he had always known was not just a pilot. He was a protector, a warrior, someone who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders to keep people safe. And now the whole world would know. But as Malik's father turned to face the crowd, something else caught his eye. A man dressed in plain clothes with a cold stare was standing off to the side, his gaze locked on Elijah. Malik didn't recognize him, but the look on the man's face sent a chill down his spine. Without missing a beat, Elijah placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. "Stay close, son," he whispered, his voice low. "We're not done here yet." Malik watched as the man in plain clothes moved toward them, his movements slow and calculated. The atmosphere shifted, the crowd parting to let him through. The man stopped in front of Elijah, his gaze never wavering. "You know what this means, don't you?" the man asked coldly. Elijah didn't flinch. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady. "I'm taking my family and leaving. I suggest you step aside." The man smirked, but it was a dangerous, empty smile. "You think it's that simple? There are bigger forces at play here. You don't get to walk away from this." Malik felt his father's grip tighten on his shoulder. He didn't know who this man was or what he wanted, but he didn't need to. His father wasn't afraid. "You're wrong," Elijah said firmly. "I already have, and so has Malik. This ends today." The helicopter engines roared back to life as Elijah turned away from the man and gave a subtle nod to the pilot. Malik watched in awe as his father led him to the helicopter, the crowd still watching in disbelief. As they climbed into the aircraft, Malik looked out the side window. seeing the man's face twist into frustration as the helicopter began to rise. "Daddy," Malik said, his voice soft but steady. "Will we come back?" Elijah looked down at his son, his expression softening. "Not for a while, son, but when it's safe, we'll be together again. And you can tell them your story. Tell them the truth." As the helicopter ascended into the sky, the ground below grew smaller. Malik's heart swelled with pride. He wasn't just a child with a big imagination. He was the son of a hero, a real hero. And this time, everyone would believe him.